Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wild, Wild Death, the show where we talk about all the ways folks left this mortal coil in the Old West. Each week, we spin the wagon wheel of untimely demise, and whatever manner of death it lands on, we tell you a story about it. My name is Jack James Busa.
I'm Susan Busa-Leshner.
And I'm Leslie Sedali.
Woohoo! The gang's together again.
Woohoo! That's right. I'm excited what we're going to listen to today.
Leslie, would you spin the wagon wheel of untimely demise?
Yes. Will you do it?
Absolutely. Yes. Here we go.
All right. Here we go.
This should be fun. Death by infidelity.
Well.
I have an incredible story about that.
Incredible, you say?
Yes.
Can't
You want to
wait.
hear it? All right.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Yes,
Let's do it.
I'm titillated, fascinated. Let's do it.
Has anything good ever come from a love triangle? Usually a love triangle happens when one person inspires love in the hearts of two people at the same time. And eventually people wind up with hurt feelings. But a love triangle can also be defined this way. Two people ignite jealousy in a third person. And eventually people wind up dead. This story is called Getting Away with Murder.
Ooh.
Okay.
If you know anything about motion picture history, you've probably seen the famous 1872 series of photos of a galloping horse that started it all. Or, if you've seen any early photographs of the American West, chances are that you've seen some spectacular photos of the Yosemite Valley. Maybe you know the photographer's name, but if you don't, his name is Eadweard Muybridge, famously known as the father of the motion picture. A photo of him taken around 1890 as a wise-looking old man with a long, flowing gray beard can be found in the first chapter of any film history book. But in 1850, Muybridge was just a newly arrived immigrant from England trying to make it as a bookseller in the United States. Except his name wasn't Muybridge then, not yet. His given name was Edward James Muggeridge, and he was born in Kingston-on-Thames, England, in 1830. He came to the U.S. to work as a bookseller, first in New York, then landing in San Francisco not long after the start of the gold rush. His brothers joined him there to help him run the bookseller's business, and these extra hands meant that Muybridge could take a trip back to England in 1860. Or that's the trip he thought he was going to take. But when Muybridge was traveling on a Butterfield overland stagecoach through Texas, the driver lost control and Muybridge was thrown from the stagecoach, hitting his head on a rock. A telegraph message published in the August 1st, 1860 San Francisco Daily Evening Bulletin read, quote, "The stage left Mountain Station with several passengers besides the driver and a roadmaster in the employ of the Overland Company, who was acting as conductor. On leaving the stable, the driver cracked his whip and the horses immediately started on a run. When they arrived at the brow of the mountain, the brakes were applied but were found to be useless. In his efforts to stop the horses, the driver drove out off the road and they came in collision with a tree, literally smashing the coach in pieces, killing one man and injuring every other person on the stage to a greater or less extent."
And one of the people on this coach was our guy.
Right, he was thrown out of the stagecoach and hit his head on a rock. Now, he woke up in a hospital in Fort Smith, Arkansas, with no personal recollection of the event. He was treated by doctors in New York, and finally he wound up in London, where he stayed for the next 5 years trying to recover. And in fact, in what I read, they told him he was never really going to get better.
Wow.
When he finally returned to San Francisco in 1866, Muybridge was, by all accounts, a changed man. And he also changed his name from Muggeridge to Muybridge. The head injury had changed his personality and manner. Instead of being this go-getting young businessman, he was now cantankerous, difficult, and eccentric. The other thing that had changed was his career. He set himself up as a professional photographer, and he was willing to take very crazy personal risks in order to get the perfect landscape image, and it paid off. In fact, there's one photo of him sitting on the peak of this sort of ridge, like 2,000 feet. It dropped below him. He's very willing to do stuff that other photographers were like, no, thank you, I'll pass.
Yeah, I guess he had a near-death experience, and he is like, I'll just get it. I'm going to do what I have to do. How cantankerous of him.
Well, I think that he also maybe didn't have a perspective that maybe he should have. Like I said,
he had some marbles loose up there after the blunt force trauma.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Pain changes a person.
And he also had this head injury.
Also.
Anyway, he's doing pretty well considering. And all of this kind of business that he did pays off. His photographs were bestsellers, eventually catching the eye of former California Governor Leland Stanford. Now, Stanford was an avid racing enthusiast, and the story goes that there's a bet that he wants to make to find out that if a horse is running, as if at one point all the feet are off the ground. Now, I don't think the bet thing is actually true. I think he
I've heard of this.
More scientific reason for wanting to know this. So he wanted to know if his racehorse had all four legs off the ground while running, and he hired Muybridge to figure out how to take a photograph of it. Now, that's what Muybridge is famous for in history. But in the meantime, Muybridge had become acquainted with a young woman on his staff named Flora Stone. Now, she was skillful at photographic retouching. She was also in an abusive marriage and recently had been deserted by her husband. Muybridge most likely aided her in getting a divorce. And once she was divorced, he asked her to marry him. By some accounts, he not only asked her to marry him, he threatened to fire her if she didn't marry him. Now, it's not clear if Muybridge had any real affection for Flora. It's pretty hard to tell with that proposal. But marriage was definitely a way to keep Flora's retouching talents on his staff. And now, as his wife, he did not have to pay her. Whatever the reason they had for tying the knot, they married in 1871. Flora was 20 years old, and Muybridge was 41. But the marriage did not turn Muybridge into a homebody. In fact, he never changed his ways at all. He still kept his usual late hours working or reading. He would still go into the field for a work assignment, leaving his new wife Flora at home, alone, 4 months at a time. But Flora was in her 20s. She was young. He didn't want to sit at home alone night after night while her husband was out in the middle of nowhere for months. I mean, who would?
Yeah, I'm with Flora.
Yeah, San Francisco was a happening place to be in the 1870s, especially at night, with theater, music, restaurants, so many places to go, so many things to see. And Flora especially enjoyed going to the theater. A young woman at that time could not go out alone at night. But Muybridge had an acquaintance, the handsome and sophisticated drama critic, Major Harry Larkins, who was more than willing to squire beautiful young Flora around to the theater.
Major Harry. Sounds hot.
I think Major was an army title. I think his name was actually Harry.
Well,
it wasn't
his name is Harry, but Major Harry, like, oh, Major Harry. I'm not taking him seriously in the army. I'd be like, Major Harry, take your top off.
Back to the story. Like her husband, Major Harry Larkins was British. He also had quite a history as a con man. Now, his father was in the army serving in India when Harry was born there on October 18th, 1846. He was orphaned in 1857 and raised by an aunt who sent him to Brussels for an education. At 17, he joined the army and racked up an enormous amount of debt that he could not pay while he was serving in India. After that, he bounced into London where he lived with his sister, spent way more money than he had, but somehow managed to get someone else to foot the bills. He attended the theater and seduced actresses, opera stars, and wealthy society women.
Wow.
I'm picturing Harry Styles in a military hat.
Yes.
That's it, baby.
That's why he got the name Major Harry. Yeah.
All right,
I don't
moving
know
on
when
from
you-
this.
Moving on.
I don't know why when you said he was raised by, I thought you were going to say he was raised by wolves. Okay, so he's dashing and charming, and he can woo the pants off of the glitterati.
He's also a con man and talks people out of money. From London, he made his way to Paris, where he continued his swindling ways. This time it failed, and he was arrested and put into the infamous Mazas prison, which was a prison that was about putting people into isolation. Pretty terrible. And he sat there while he waited to go to trial for fraud. Amazingly, even with a mountain of evidence against him, Harry managed to talk the court into acquitting him. He
Wow.
returned to England, attended more theater, seduced more women, was briefly arrested for fraud again, and became a major in the French army during the Franco-Prussian War, where he was wounded. When the war ended, having pretty much conned most of the wealthy in his circle out of some money, Harry sailed for greener pastures in America. By 1872, Harry had landed in San Francisco. He was only 26 at this point.
Wow.
Sophisticated, educated, cultural, witty, good-looking, and a surprisingly good writer. Even though he kept trying to swindle money from people, he made a respectable name for himself as the drama critic for the San Francisco Post. And he belonged to a circle of creative people in San Francisco. He was extremely popular. I mean, sometimes when he would do a swindling thing, they would just come and take care of the bill for him. That's how popular he was.
Yeah. He's
my God.
very, very, very charming.
Very charming. He was just a lot of fun.
I have a few friends that would be very interested in Major Harry, and we'd be having many conversations about, he is not good enough for you, babe. He is a con man. And they'll be like, but I love him. I'm like, no. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's that guy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nobody understands him but me.
So he makes his way all the way to San Francisco, which is not, I would not imagine an
been
easy thing to do back then.
London, Paris. He might have even been a spy during the Franco-Prussian War. All of this before he was 26 years old. He's been busy. All right. He's in San Francisco. He's got himself a job as the drama critic for the San Francisco Post. He's got a lot of friends. He's just a lot of fun to being around. He has great stories, and he's a very interesting guy. And he and Flora got along well. She was beautiful, interested in the theater, lonely, and Harry had a way with the ladies.
That's his type.
Right. But the longer Muybridge stayed away, the closer Flora and Harry became. In fact, it seems that they may have actually fallen in love with each other.
Here's where we get into dangerous water, I'm sensing.
Eventually, Muybridge returns to town and his marital duties. Now, he'd heard some rumors about Flora and Harry, and Muybridge went over and confronted Harry, who claimed they were innocent of any wrong behavior. So Muybridge was mollified, and for a while, things go well enough at home that Flora becomes pregnant. Muybridge was out of town again when Flora went into labor, giving birth to a son on April 14, 1874. The midwife sent a telegram to Muybridge, who returned to San Francisco to see his son. And they named, and I hope I'm going to say this right, they named the baby Florado Helios Muybridge, which is a mashup of Flora and Muybridge's first names, and Helios was the name of Muybridge Photography Studio.
Ooh, wow.
Hold on.
That's the
So
moniker.
creative.
One
Yeah.
more time. What was his name? The baby?
Florado Helios Muybridge. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Eadweard is the person that came up with all of that. Anyway, Muybridge only stayed at home with his wife and baby for 10 days and then left again for another work assignment. The midwife stayed a few weeks to help care for the baby, and according to her,
Flora and Harry saw each other during this time, and in fact,
Flora used the midwife as a sort of go-between, mailing and collecting letters from Flora to Harry and vice versa, and evidently the midwife was kind of sympathetic to all of this. But not when it came time to getting paid. Muybridge neglected to pay the midwife what he owed her,
and the midwife was forced to threaten to sue to get the money.
Oh, God.
Muybridge said, "Hey, Flora's already paid you." But the midwife said, "Nuh-uh."
and she produced a letter that Flora had written to her stating that she, Flora, could not pay because Muybridge had not given her any money. When Muybridge read that letter, he noticed that Harry's name was mentioned very casually all over the letter. And one thing led to another, and the midwife was forced to hand over all of the correspondence she had in her possession from both Flora and Harry. Tucked inside one of them was a picture of little baby Florado with the words "Little Harry" written on the back.
Oh, no.
To Muybridge, that was proof that he was not the father of little Florado. Harry Larkins was.
If your husband's gone for a long time when the baby's, little tiny, and somebody comes over, you might wish it was little Harry. It doesn't mean that it is. But I mean, there was
They
no
had no way to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, also it's bad. It's like all of these things together is
bad.
I can see bruising
It looks bad.
someone's ego. It does not look
You
good.
know what? You leave home for that long, you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. But
Yeah,
that's
well,
not what happened.
No, he's
Is that
like,
the
I don't
rule?
he's like, I don't care. I'm throwing a fit.
According to the midwife, when Muybridge read these letters, he went ballistic, shaking from head to toe. He was so upset. But then he calmed down and made a plan to go see Harry Larkins. Now, by this time, Harry Larkins had left the drama critic job in San Francisco and was now using his writing talent at the Yellow Jacket Mine Company in Calistoga, California. So, on October 17th, 1874, that's where Muybridge went. Now, it was late at night. Now, all of this is kind of important because of his defense later on, but it was late at night when Muybridge arrived at a house near the Yellow Jacket Mine. Now, he had taken a ferry boat, a train, and then hired a carriage practically close to midnight in order to get there. Harry was inside playing cribbage with a few friends. Muybridge got out of the carriage, told a man standing outside of the house that he wanted to see Harry. They were like, "Hey, come on in."
But Muybridge declined. He wanted to see Harry outside.
So the man goes inside and goes, "Hey, Harry, there's somebody out here who wants to talk to you."
Harry was inside, joking around with his friends, playing cards. He says, "I'll be right back," and goes to the door.
He could see there was a man standing in the dark. And the man asked Harry what his name was. Harry told him his name. And then Muybridge stepped forward, saying, "I have a message from my wife," and shot Harry through the heart.
Whoa.
Oh, whoa.
Harry staggered back through the house. His friends in the house grabbed Muybridge before he could fire a second shot, and then Harry fell to the ground dead.
Wow.
Then Muybridge sat down calmly. He apologized to the women in the house, saying he didn't realize there were going to be women there, and he apologized for scaring them. And although
Well, at least he apologized.
Yeah. he didn't put up a fight, the men kind of sort of tied him up and took him over to the constable, who put him in jail, and he was charged with murder. In October, poor Flora filed for divorce. She claimed that she had not been unfaithful, but that Muybridge had been emotionally abusive, and she was now without any means of financial support and was seeking a very small amount of alimony to support herself and their baby. Seems reasonable.
Okay. Yeah.
Her petition was denied.
Why?
Because she was an adulteress.
Probably. And also, she didn't have enough evidence, but I gotta ask, how much evidence do you need? Here she is with a tiny baby and no money.
I mean, by God.
Yeah, what's little Floricio supposed to eat? Whatever his name is.
Florado.
Okay, that's messed up. Oh, so I would imagine, I don't know, but the case against her is like, well, you shouldn't have been an adulterer. This would have never happened. It's actually your fault that all of this went down.
She's not an equal citizen, that is for sure.
Muybridge's trial began in February. Leland Stanford, the very wealthy former governor of California, helped Muybridge get a great lawyer whose name was W. Pendergast, just like a made-up name if you ask me. Of course, as women could not serve on juries at that time, the jury consisted of 12 white men. Muybridge pleaded insanity, blaming his actions on that head injury he sustained in the stagecoach accident 15 years earlier. But then he also undercut the insanity, idea by admitting that he had carefully planned his actions and went to see Harry only because he planned to kill him. In fact, as the betrayed husband in this love triangle, he had every right to kill his wife's lover, that it was justifiable homicide according to a, quote, higher law of human nature. He also told the jury that as he was so betrayed, he would not return to his wife as he could never trust her again. In his closing remarks, his lawyer, Pendergast, said this about his client. I cannot ask you to send this man forth to family and home. He has none. But I do ask you to send him forth free. Let him take up the thread of his broken life and resume that profession on which his genius has shed so much luster, the profession which is now his only love. Let him go forth into the green fields, by the bright waters, through the beautiful valleys, and up and down the swelling coast, and in the active work of the magic of his art, so that he may gain surcease of sorrow and pass on to his allotted end in comparative peace. End quote.
Wow.
Wowzer.
I'm sitting here wondering if that higher law of human nature that allowed him to get away with murder would have allowed it if it were a woman who killed her husband.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, the lawyer managed to sway the jury.
Now, later on when they talked about it, the men on the jury all knew that murder wasn't legal, but it was something they all thought they'd do themselves in the same situation.
Oh, of
So they
course.
set him free.
Okay.
Now, he's free. Muybridge took little baby Florado and put him in an orphanage.
Wow.
Oh my God.
That's horrible.
It's horrible. He's an infant. Muybridge returned to his photographic experiments, securing his place in history and eternal global fame as the father of motion pictures. He died in 1904 at the age of 72. As Florado grew up, pictures show that he had a marked resemblance to Eadweard Muybridge.
Wow. Well,
Florado lived a quiet life. He worked as a ranch hand and a gardener, and he died in 1944 after being struck by a car.
well, damn, Florado. What happened to the wife? What happened to Flora?
Flora died of typhus 5 months after the trial ended in July 1875.
Stressed, all get out, and
Right.
had all this horrible stuff happen, and her body got sick.
Right. And when she died, she was only 24.
Wow.
Oh.
Broke with a baby. She had tried
Yeah.
again to get a divorce, get some kind of money, but it had not been granted before she died. And she was buried in San Francisco. Oh, but decades later, When cemeteries were removed from San Francisco city limits, she was disinterred and reburied. Flora's final resting place? It's in a mass grave in Colmas, California, behind a movie theater.
What the hell? This is not okay.
I think the person who was really murdered here was Flora.
Yeah, me too.
The thing that I found kind of disheartening was just how hard it was to find out anything substantial about her. There were some great books about Harry Larkins, and there's some terrific books, a lot of books and a lot of information about Eadweard Muybridge. But boy, it is very difficult to find information about her. And she's described a lot of different ways, like this poor innocent little thing, or also this scheming woman who was just all over Muybridge for his money. I don't buy that one because the scheming woman, because he left her without any money all of the
Yeah.
time.
I don't buy the scheming woman either. She also had a trade.
I mean, women had no power. You can't vote. You're not represented in the courts. I mean, you can't have a bank account. It's amazing she had a job.
Yeah.
That's
know,
what
and
I
then
was thinking. She had a career. Not
Yeah.
many women did back then.
Right,
Mhm.
but he was the big dog in town, and pretty
Right.
much said, "If you don't marry me, you're not going to work anymore. And by the way, you're going to keep working for me, and
Wow.
now I don't have to pay you."
And then also, whenever I go off and do whatever I want, and you're still a human being, and the marriage doesn't end up working out, you're not gonna get anything from me, and I took everything away from you.
Right, and I'm the injured party. I mean,
Wow.
you can say that's because he had an injury, and he had a serious lack of empathy. And if he ever had it, definitely the injury took that away. But he's the one we remember. He's the hero of motion pictures.
We can give her props on this show. So Flora, we see you. We love you, girl. If you'd like to know more about this story, please visit the links in our show notes, and be sure to follow us on social media at The Wild Wild Death. And you can learn more about our other shows at 2222 Media. We have a bevy of fabulous programming. Check it out, man.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
And adios, muchachos. Mwah.
The Wild Wild Death is a 2222 media production.